What's Working by Monday.com.
Hi, I'm Yadin Katz, and this is What's Working, Monday.com's podcast about what being a manager is all about. We are a few episodes into this podcast, and by now we are happily starting to see that the number of listeners is starting to grow exponentially from one episode to the next. And so today, I first wanted to start off by thanking our listeners, ladies, gents. It's been a real pleasure doing this for you. And if you're coming back time after time and joining us, hopefully these talks are serving you in a pragmatic and practical way, and we'll keep improving. I can assure you that. Today, I have no doubt that serving you will definitely be the case, as our guest on this episode is not only a manager, but someone who works alongside managers with a mission to assist them improve their managerial abilities. By working closely with leaders from many industries, this guy is constantly shaping up a secret sauce, a formula, an algorithm, if you will, that can help other managers understand what the traits essential to becoming excellent and what each and every one of us can do right in order to improve the way we manage right now. I am here with David Chinn, Senior Partner at McKinsey and Managing Partner of McKinsey's Israel office, who will try to give us the blueprint for the ideal great manager. Wow, long intro. David, thank you for being with us today. Did I manage my intro all right?
Yeah, you set a high bar.
Well, we can wrap it up now, and thank you so much. So, David, we'll start off. For the listeners who might have heard the name McKinsey, but are not entirely sure what the company does, would you give us a quick rundown of the business?
Yeah, McKinsey's a management consulting company, and I'll say a bit more about what that means. We've been around for almost 100 years, so we're probably the people who invented this business of management consulting. Didn't exist 100 years ago when James O. McKinsey founded the company. And what we do is we advise the world's leading institutions, be those companies, government bodies, or third sector, NGOs and so on how to improve their productivity. Basically, that means, if it's a business, ultimately, typically that boils down to profits. But we also think about how they make it better for their employees, how they deliver more value to their customers, how they contribute to society, protect the environment. Those are all objectives that managers have to hold in mind today.
Yeah.
And we do that through giving them advice, building their skills, so a mixture of training and tools, and finally helping them design and operate their organizations in a way that's productive and effective and satisfying.
Yeah, and you're saying this off the cuff, but these are not small, medium businesses. These are big, the biggest brands out there. Will we be name dropping?
I'm afraid we won't be name dropping. One of the basic principles of being able to give good advice is confidentiality.
Okay, but we can definitely learn, even without discussing the names. We can definitely take a lot.
Yeah, and I'll talk about some examples without mentioning the names.
Perfect. So, how did you find your way to McKinsey in your current positions?
I grew up in the UK, and I moved to Israel when I was 22 after university, and eventually I found my way to INSEAD. It's a business school where I did an MBA, and McKinsey recruits a lot of people out of business school. And to be honest, consulting is one of the few industries where we don't really worry about what you did before. We're looking for people who can learn quickly, who can work well with other people, who have the potential to be leaders. And I was very lucky to be recruited. I interviewed with lots of companies, and the only job offer I got was with McKinsey.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it worked out okay.
Wow. So what exactly do you do?
So I really do two things. My job number one, like every consultant partner, and actually everybody at McKinsey, is serving clients. Mm-hmm. So I work mostly in Israel now with some of the country's both biggest companies and actually some of the country's smallest companies on helping them make better decisions and helping them change the way they work. So I'll give you just one example. I'm working with one very large organization who want to become faster. Mm-hmm. They're in a traditional industry which is increasingly digitized, and continually, being threatened by startups who are agile, who are quick, and they've realized that the way they operate is just slowing them down. So we're helping them to restructure the way they work using the principles of what's called agile, will be familiar to many people in high tech, to make effectively the entire core of the business agile, which involves putting together people from the business, so people who are in contact with customers, people who design products, with people from technology to work faster, more agile, to empower the teams of people who actually produce the products that customers use, enable them to work quicker. That's, if you can imagine let's call it old-fashioned hierarchy, breaking the hierarchy, creating these cross-functional teams, doing it for the whole organization, it changes everything. It changes how you plan. It changes how you manage, it changes how you measure, it changes how you make decisions, all of those things. And that's, changing a company of several thousand people over the course of probably 2 years.
Can you actually do that? These are companies who are extremely big, traditional. They're running in a very, very systematic and old-fashioned methodologies, maybe. You come in, you say, be more agile because we did this research or that research. Do you see actual change?
Yeah, you do see actual change. It's not enough to say be more agile.
Yeah. Here's a good book.
That's
Listen to this podcast.
That's like saying to your kids, tidy your room. It really works. You really have to give people new skills. You have to explain to them why it makes sense. You have to change actually how the processes work. How do people get rewarded? What do you get promoted for? What do we measure? All of those things. And then you have to redesign step by step the organization and help people move from one way of working to the other. And you can't do that all in one go.
Yeah.
It's too disruptive.
Wow. So it's, generally speaking, it's coming in, doing a research or listening to the problem, probably fitting you with all the information, doing a research. What exactly does it involve?
So there's a range. There's many situations where a company calls us and says, we need to make a specific decision. Let's say we want to go into a new market in a new. We've got a great product. We want to enter the US market. Who are the customers? What are the right partners that we need to have? How much should we invest? What kind of people do we need to hire? How do we make a plan to do this? That's pure advice, right? They're going to execute that on their own.
Yeah.
That's at one extreme. Or we want to buy a company. Can you due diligence it to see if it's if it's worth the money that we were going to pay for it? What the problems are? Whether this is a good opportunity for us or not? What will be the synergies? What will be the fit with us? At the other extreme, an organization we might know for a long time. We talk to them continuously about what we're learning from our other clients, from our research. We invest over $500 million a year in what you would think of as R&D in the business of management, developing tools and techniques, working together with some of the world's leading companies that we can then help other companies to adopt. And so this organization, we've known them for a long time. We were talking to them a lot about what's the biggest challenge, and they said speed. And so, we were able to say to them, in your industry, this is what other people are doing. These are the different choices people are making. They went to visit some other companies abroad, see what they did. And together we came to this solution of a shift, not for the whole organization, for about 40% to this agile operating model that enables them to take advantage of what other companies have already learned and therefore avoid a whole bunch of the mistakes by kind of following the best practice.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's the setting. That's the context. And it's good, I think, for our listeners to understand what we're talking about. And now we want to see and learn from your experience, from other companies' experience. But I want to start off with the bottom line. How would you define a great manager?
I think a great manager is a person who can get the results that the organization asks of them. Super depends on what level you are in the organization, how that looks, what your role is, while creating a great experience for their team, where their people learn and develop, and whoever their customer is, whether it's an internal customer or an external customer, the customer is appreciates the service, feels that it's not just good for the company, it's good for the customer, and at the same time living within the values and enhancing the kind of cultural environment in which work is done. I think that's the full package. It's a complicated.
What if I'll toss in a curveball here? What if the company doesn't define? Sometimes you see managers who are kind of these entrepreneurs. The board says, okay, go ahead, or the CEO says, that's your area, you deal with that, do what you want to do, and nobody leads, nobody guides you. You have to be the person. What do you do then?
Yeah. I want to distinguish between the result and the way you get the result, because I think for great managers, both of those are strong, right?
Yeah.
In almost all settings, even if you're the CEO of a startup, there's some group of people with whom you've agreed what the overall goals are. Mm-hmm. We talk about empowerment a lot. What does empowerment mean? It means it tells you what we want you to achieve. We don't tell you how to do it. That's empowering you, right? Because almost none of us are completely free of any external stakeholder who has a view of what we have to do.
Empowerment is not telling you how to do it?
Empowerment is allowing you
to do whatever.
To work out how to do it.
Okay.
Empowerment,
which is challenging.
Yeah, I think empowerment is giving you the freedom, but within guardrails. Okay. Every institution has a set of guardrails, right? There are limits to your authority. There are values. There are rules. But real empowerment, I think, is clear accountability for the outcome, clear guardrails of what's within your control and what's without, and then allowing you to find your way of how to do it with the support necessary, because we don't always know.
Yeah.
So to come back, I think good managers are able to achieve the objective and to do it in a way that meets multiple other goals. First of all, the personal needs of their team, the needs of customers, the needs of society, and the needs of the institution. That to me is a great manager. They reach goals in a way that is positive for all stakeholders.
I see. So there's a specific model in your eyes?
I think there are many models.
Many models.
Yeah. And because there are two things that are always different.
Yeah.
The first is the context. What industry are we in? What kind of resources do we have? What's the starting point? If you run, the family business, which is a corner shop, you have a very different set of resources, people available to you, experience and so on, than if you run, a multi-billion-dollar global corporation, right? Yeah. You're still a manager, right?
Yeah.
You still have a set of objectives, stakeholders and so on. So the first is the context. And the second is the human being themselves, right? As a manager, our tool is ourself.
Yeah.
We don't, in the end, we recruit other tools where we each have different strengths and weaknesses. We have different personalities. And I think, the people I have seen who are the best at this know themselves well. They understand where they are really strong. They understand the things they're never going to be strong at. They make sure their team complements them and that they design the way in which they act as managers to bring their strengths to the fore, to minimize the negative impact of their weaknesses. And in that way, in the context, using themselves as the tool, they can kind of find the best way to because we're all muddling through it.
Okay. So let's frame this, because this is I might be managing people here in the company, but right now I'm serving as the host of this podcast, which means that I'm the media, which means that I try to put things in headlines and find the common denominators. Things. So let's try to think, and I know you can pull this out of your sleeve. Specific, the common denominators, properties or traits needed to be a good manager, whether I'm an SMB, a startup, a big brand, whatever. What are the some of the bullet points?
So let me start with our research on what makes great CEOs. We just published a book called CEO Excellence. It's based on research on nearly 8,000 CEOs in our database. 1,000 CEOs that we've worked with directly, and it's deep research. And we found that there are 6 things that the CEO needs to worry about. Now, other managers don't always have to worry about all of those things, but there are elements of this for everybody. The first is setting the direction. Where are we going? What's the vision? What's the strategy? And how are we going to prioritize the different things that we do? How are we going to allocate investment, people, and so on to different things? That's setting the direction. That's number one. I think, as we said before, all managers in the end need to take whatever their mission is and set direction for the people that they manage. The second thing they have to do is they have to align the organization, the culture, the design of the organization. What are the different roles? How do we divide the tasks into different roles? How do we set up different teams? And how do we get the right talent into the organization? How do we create a system of people, a people system that works for us? The third thing they have to do is they have to mobilize through leaders. They have to get other people, often who manage more people, to do things, right? That will achieve the vision. So you have to make a plan. Yeah. You have to get teams working together. You have to have a process. How often do we meet? What do we talk about? And so on. Then the fourth thing is we have to manage ourselves. What
does that mean?
Well, so every one of us has a different number of working hours in the day.
Yeah.
All of those are capped at 24, right? And the job of a manager covers so many different things that need to be done that if you chose to, you could be working 24/7 and still not get everything done. So first of all, if you're doing that, your team are probably feeling micromanaged.
Yeah.
You're going to be exhausted, and ultimately you're not going to be effective.
Yeah.
So a manager has to pick what they're going to do themselves, what they're going to delegate to others, how they're going to lead, how they're going to maintain their energy. And also, you have to, as a manager, you have to constantly be able to look through 2 lenses, right? It's like wearing bifocals, right? You have to look close up at the work of what your team is doing, but you have to look out to what's happening in the world, to what's happening with your competition, what's happening with your market, and kind of be able to bounce backwards and forwards, find perspective while getting the day job done. So that's what I mean by managing yourself.
Yeah.
The fifth thing is you have to connect with stakeholders. Every manager has customers.
Yeah.
If you're in HR, your customers are mostly internal. If you're in sales, your customers are very much external. But everybody has customers. Everybody has peers in the organization that they work with. Most organizations have relationships with media, with analysts. Sometimes your competitors are stakeholders. You might be regulated. So, you have to manage the stakeholders around you. And finally, particularly if you're a CEO, you have to manage the board. And if you're below the CEO, you have to manage your boss. Or if you're in a matrix, your bosses.
You have to manage your boss.
Let's put it at a minimum, you have to engage with them.
Okay.
But, you have to communicate. You have to align expectations. You have to make sure that they support what you want to do. Because remember, we talked about you might have objectives, but you want to be able to choose how you do things.
Wow.
But you need people to agree that that's the right way to do things. Typically, you need other people to help you. You need money. You need other kinds of resources. If you can't get your boss or your board on board with that, you'll struggle to get the resources that you need. So that's six things. It's a complicated set of things, but a good manager is thinking about all 6 of those things, spending their time on different things at different times.
Now, we're going to sum that up at the end of the episode because that was super interesting and it brought up so many questions to mind. First off, I'll just start off with something that I just popped right now. Is it even possible juggling all these like 6 or even more? And I read here and I listen there and I get so much insights all the time. Can you actually come to a point where you're not moving or are acting by your gut and you're actually doing things in a rational manner? Do you understand my question? Like, there's so many things to consider all the time as a manager while managing your business and employees. And now you have to think, oh, David said this and the other guy said this and Simon Sinek said that. Is it possible?
So
Be true.
so look, very normal people do this very well all the time, right? It's not, so it's clearly not impossible.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's be serious, right? Most of the time, you don't have to do everything at once.
Yeah.
And some of these things, if you have a board meeting once a quarter, you have a rhythm then. You prepare for the board, you prepare your board members, you have the meeting, and then you get on with the next quarter of work. You're not, but by the way, if the company is having a hard time, or the company's raising money or whatever, you might be engaging with your board much more frequently because, and the second thing is you have a team.
Yeah.
You don't have to do, this is exactly my point about managing yourself. You don't have to do everything yourself all the time. If you're, let's say, some managers are, not amazingly good at, changing the culture. They don't have the experience. It doesn't come to them naturally. But you might have a great head of HR or HR business partner who's really experienced at that.
Yeah.
So, you can, at a minimum, have them advise you, but maybe you can delegate most of that work to them.
Yeah.
And only do the little bit that you have to do as the leader. So there are lots of options around how you get things done, because if you have to do it all yourself, most of us don't, let's say, don't work in organizations of one person. And by the way, many of those things then are easier if there's only me.
Yeah. I'll just do it. Yeah. You mentioned being good at specific things. So I've encountered many managers throughout the years. Some were just naturally brilliant, naturally good. You see a person that is weird in a certain way, maybe neurotic, but he's a great manager, and other might not be as good. Is there hope for people who want to be managers? Can they actually lead without having this intrinsic natural ability?
Yeah, look, I think people often distinguish between management and leadership. And quite often when we see these people who we think are amazing, naturals, it's often the leadership that we notice or charisma that we notice, not necessarily the management that we're noticing. So I think, we talk about, a science of management. There are tools, there are techniques, there are processes. Obviously, there's an art of management as well. It's about human beings. Leadership seems to be a little bit more nebulous. We all have this sense of the born leader.
Yeah.
And you even see it in the playground. That some kids are leading the other kids. I'm not sure I'm sure there's tons of research about it, but I think, what we observe is people, first of all, people's skills grow, right? I mean, that if you promote a team leader to be the CEO of the organization, they're most likely going to have a tough time.
Yeah.
But the CEOs of many organizations started out as team leaders. So, people learn. I mean, these are skills. I feel it on myself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I started 25 years or so ago at McKinsey, and I was definitely not ready to lead, a country practice. I could barely kind of get my own work done. 25 years later, I'm lucky. I've had a lot of apprenticeship and a lot of coaching from other people, and I still make tons of mistakes. So I think there's tons that people can learn. And tons of tools. I mean, it's interesting being here at Monday, right? I think you make tools for managers, right? Yeah. To manage all that complexity. So, I guess you believe it can be, you can be supported as a manager to be successful anyway.
I want to nitpick a bit about something you mentioned it, as a footnote, micromanaging, which is a big thing I've noticed. Most of the managers I've had were micromanagers. And if you take that away from them, they would not, that's just mon avis, I think they would not have succeeded. They were great at texting you at 10 p.m. because something was off at the website and you got to change it now. What's your take on micromanaging?
So I think there are some very difficult transitions for people in their journey from, let's say, worker to manager. I think, first of all, people with really strong technical skills, as they move from doing the work to managing others who do the work, I sometimes find that very difficult because when you are personally able to do the work of your team and you are more productive, more experience. Yeah, that temptation to do their work for them rather than coach them to be better at doing their work is super high.
Yeah.
And often people actually love, very strong technical people love doing the technical work. I mean, it's like that's the reason they're in their job, is they love doing it. And management for them is like a punishment, right? They no longer get to do the work that they love, right? Yeah. That's a complicated transition to learn to move from doing the work yourself to doing the work through others. Is a tough transition for a lot of people. And, as they're going, even people who succeed as they go through the transition have to, constantly fight the challenge to micromanage. Some people, because they don't have the right coaching, because they don't have the right insight, maybe because they don't have a good enough team, never get, struggle to get past that moment of micromanaging. So that's one, I think, very, very difficult transition. I think the second very difficult transition is the one where you manage managers.
Yeah.
So you go from managing people who do work to managing team leaders.
Yeah.
And then, there's this real sense of loss of control. Because you really have to learn a new set of ways of setting objectives, of measuring performance, right? You go from, in a sense, looking at people's work to looking at data about the work that their team does. That's like another whole mindset shift. And again, people need to be trained. We often promote people to do this completely new job, completely different, doesn't use almost any of the skills they had before.
Yeah.
And we give them no training. You were a great programmer, so now we're going to make you a development team leader. And we didn't tell you how to do that at all. Or, you led an amazing development team, so super productive. We're going to make you head of R&D. And we're going to give you this big budget and set you some big objectives. We'll give you no training on how to divide the resources, manage your teams. These are tough transitions. In big organizations, the systems often exist, and you've been part of the system, you've been measured, so you understand the metrics and so on. It's much easier. In small organizations, often you create the systems yourself, and that's hard.
That is insane. You actually you made a great segue, because that was my next question, asking about this. It feels like society and companies, that's what they expect. Yeah, you do something, you do a job a few years, and then you become a manager. It's like I was a soccer player and now I'm going to turn out to be the cheerleader. It's something completely different. So where is this headed, or what would you recommend companies to do? Because I feel, and that's a personal challenge for me, I feel like I'm alone at this right now. I have to listen to podcasts and search for blogs and look for articles, and nobody is actually guiding me. You can go get an MBA, that's fine. But nobody within the organizations actually lead you and train you, except courses every now and then. What do you think companies should do?
Well, so first of all, people are ambitious. They want to advance. They want more responsibility. Yeah. That's a good thing, right? Yeah. We should encourage that, Mostly people also want to learn, right? Yeah. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to believe that almost everybody who works in our organization wants to succeed, wants to do a good job, wants to learn, and is ambitious for themselves, for the organization, for their team. Because I think sometimes we kind of, we see people having a hard time and we make some assumptions about their motivations. Let's assume the motivations are good. Yeah. I think my experience is in general, ambition is a good thing. It leads to mostly good outcomes. I think it depends. It depends a lot on what kind of organization, right? I have friends who start businesses. They've never run a business. They're kind of learning along the way. They, the ones who do it well have an amazing network of other people who have done it before or a little bit ahead of them, give them different perspectives, and they're constantly getting advice. I think humility is like number one, right? We don't know. When an organization with a bit more resources needs to invest in training, but also, I think, this is a real gift that we have at McKinsey, is a culture of coaching and feedback. Because how do we really learn? We really learn when people who see us at work, watch what we do. If they know something more than we do about how to do it, or we do something that affects them in a way that makes them not productive or not feel good, they tell us. in a respectful way, but in a straightforward way.
Yeah.
And then if they know how to do the thing we don't know how to do better than us, they coach us.
Yeah.
By the way, you can get coaching and feedback from people on your team, from your peers, from your superiors. But, kind of in a culture where that's everybody's job, the chance that we make fewer mistakes and learn quicker is much higher.
Yeah.
So I think this culture of coaching and feedback is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about what are the, as people advance, what is the help they're going to need? And by the way, it can be giving them a book or a list of podcasts. There's many ways to learn. And I think then for each individual to have a network of peers in their organization outside who are in their profession, they can share the things they struggle with.
Yeah.
Is an amazingly powerful tool. Because if it's somebody in another organization who's kind of a friend, it doesn't. You can get advice from them in a way that is not kind of, doesn't bring in the politics of your organization. It's less ego threatening, and you can give advice, so it feels like a relationship.
The things that I know it's challenging for me, and I talked about this with many different people throughout the years. In my past, I was a little entrepreneur, and I did things like a few initiatives that I started, and I always had the feeling that I sometimes I want to go back to what it was like in school, right? You have a 1st to 12th grade, and they lead you. You know the course, you know where you're going. Then once you finished your undergrad and your MBA, then you're on your own. Yeah, go get a job. You like this job, stay. You want to quit. Go do this. You want to promote here. You can move forward, do other things, do more initiatives. It's up to you and you only. Are there any structures? Does this sound familiar to you? Are these frustrations that you encounter with people that you work with, managers that you work, that sometimes you feel like you're on your own, like the board might not be enough or your manager might not be enough, that you want a bigger framework?
Are you just saying that it sucks to be a grown-up?
Please, let's go to the playground, man. Yeah, that's a way to answer my question. Are these frustrations that you... that's one way to put it. It's hard being a grown-up, and companies want to make their employees happier, want to push them forward. They have this incentive to keep them here and give them everything they want. Build a course and build a plan for them and show them how they can proceed. And if you don't want to be a manager, you can become an IC, an individual contributor, and that's a great position for you. So I'm seeing these things. What I'm saying, I'm starting to see these. That was not the case 10 years ago, and now companies are headed in this direction. Is that a trend line that you see, that you recognize in the market?
So I think underlying, I think what you're talking about is the fact that all companies are now tech companies.
All companies
are now tech companies. Technology, is eating everything we do, right? Whatever you do, data, analytics, software, more sophisticated hardware, complicated networks, complicated supply chains, digital integration with your partner, all these things are happening, right? Yeah. Everything, I think we've got evidence that, the use of data and technology can improve most, the productivity and performance of most businesses. Now, when all companies become tech companies, that means we need many more people with different sets of skills than we maybe had before. If we didn't think of ourselves as a tech company before.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you're a bank or an insurance company, you've always been a tech company.
Yeah.
I mean, the factory is a computer.
Yeah.
But still, there was this massive separation often between business and tech. Those are coming together. But if you're in mining, you think, well, it's all about big machines that drill holes in the ground and so on. But it's all actually about the data that makes those machines more productive, that tells you where to drill, that keeps you safe, all of those things. That means you have to suddenly have teams of data analysts. Now, what we discover when we work with technically talented people is that they don't all want to climb a corporate hierarchy that involves becoming a manager of managers of managers, right? It's for many of them, their genius is in doing their technical thing. They want to become more and more expert. They want to learn new ways of doing it. They want to be creative in what they do. They want all of those things.
Yeah.
And we need organizations that cherish and advance those people, but letting them be great engineers or great data scientists, not taking them away from the work that they love. At some point in their career, they might change their mind and want to be a manager, but maybe not. And we don't want to lose all the knowledge and skill and talent because we put them in a little box that says this is all you're allowed to do. You're a creative, talented person who wants to continually learn and develop. So, organizations are having to find different ways to appreciate different kinds of people's contributions. So we work a lot more with people outside the organization. We have many more freelancers, integration with third parties who provide services and so on. So there's lots of different ways we work with different kinds of people to get the business of technology companies done.
Yeah.
And so traditional industries are learning new ways of organizing that is really forced on them by this thing of everyone's becoming a tech company.
Wow. Super interesting. Do you think that this model can work in the long run? I'm professional at one thing I do now, but as I get older, I might be replaced. Or now we're talking about ChatGPT and AI. We spoke about that a little bit before we started. Where do you see this headed?
We did a bunch of research on AI a couple of years ago, which is like prehistory, right?
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. We looked at I think several thousand roles that represent the majority of jobs. And we looked at, the parts that could be replaced with technology, with current technology, with technology that was kind of on the drawing board and that was, and some things like are very hard to replace. So for example, physical care provided by a nurse or a home carer with today's technologies is quite hard to replace. Whereas some of the things like answering the telephone for relatively simple queries, actually is getting now relatively easy to replace. Not all the technology is quite there, but it's pretty close. And we found that, so there's a range, but about 30% of work done by people was kind of feasibly imaginable to be done by machines.
What about managers?
Well, of course.
Will managers be replaced?
Of course. Well, first of all...
He said, of course.
Of course.
Wrap it up, close the podcast. Yeah.
Not all, but the point is, we like to have like absolute rules, right? And the truth is, like everything in life, it's complicated.
Yeah.
So, first of all, let's say we say 30% of a role can be replaced by a machine. The problem is that often a single person does multiple things and like 25% of what that person does can be done by a machine. That doesn't mean we don't need that person because actually the other 75% we can't replace.
Yeah.
And if the person is no longer there, that doesn't get done. What happens is jobs change, roles change. We think of machines augmenting humans. I think it's a really nice way to think about it, right? Because, I'll give you an example. ChatGPT, one of my clients, has a complicated customer service thing. People call with very complicated queries. They call multiple times. They use ChatGPT now to summarize all the previous calls so instead of the agent taking 3 or 4 minutes to catch up when the customer calls them, what were all the previous conversations, gives them one paragraph. It's
wow.
Yeah. So it massively improves the experience of the customer, makes the agent much more productive. Obviously, you need fewer agents because we're handling the calls in less time, but but it's still a complicated, judgment-based human interaction. One day maybe that will all go away, but it's kind of still hard to automate complex interactions with customers.
Yeah.
Now, the radical solution, make the product simpler, so there are no more complex interactions. But the world doesn't just get simpler because some companies make simple products. Yeah. So. It's going to be mixed. If you have smaller teams, if you have less teams, you need fewer managers.
Yeah.
Some of the things that managers do. Lots of managers spend a lot of time putting together reports. Honestly, that's like a phenomenal waste of people's time.
And a lot of managers don't like that. As you mentioned, some managers I don't want to do a report. I want to do the job.
Yeah,
I want to work with people.
And lots of people have to put together reports that no one ever really looks at. So there's a lot of time wasting. Now,
Yeah.
We've been refining organizations for, hundreds of years, and we still haven't managed to get rid of stupid time wasting bureaucratic activity. However hard we try.
You're leading me to my next question. Yeah, go ahead.
But I think some of those things will be, done easily by, when we have a machine that we can write in, could you cut last month's sales figures by region and salesperson and customer type, instead of then doing the work yourself. So some of the stuff that managers do will get automated.
Yeah.
And that will be incredibly helpful.
What would you say, one line or maybe one tip for managers need to handle it? It's not a simple task, managing people from sometimes all over the world remotely. Is there a tip you can give to managers in this situation?
So I think, by the way, the people for whom this is hardest is managers.
Uh-huh.
It's super easy when all your people sit in a small space. You can see each one of them. You can kind of visually supervise them, right? In a hybrid global organization where people are everywhere, not even all in the same time zone, you may never meet people who you manage, right? That's I think the thing you have to think hard about is you actually have to think about the design of people's jobs. Just assuming that we can make this shift and the jobs all remain the same doesn't work, right? You have to think about the interfaces between different people when they need to interact. You then have to think about your management processes. How often do you have a one-on-one? What kind of team meetings do you have? Do you have meetings of teams? How do you share information? It's really interesting. There are organizations that were born virtual, but never had an office.
Yeah.
GitHub is a great example. You can go onto their website. You can read. They've got these reams of documentation around how things work around here, because they know that for people who never meet each other, you can't just assume that how the place works is communicated in this kind of chit chat between people at the next desk or around the water cooler or over lunch. You have to be much more meaningful and thoughtful about writing it down and communicating it. So, depending on the way the organization works, the way you create and maintain culture, ways of working, corporate processes, how you design jobs, all of these things have to be different. So I think the real lesson for managers is you have to actually think much more deeply about this topic that I call aligning the organization. What's the structure, how the jobs are designed, how the teams work, how you interact, what kind of processes of regular update, and then how you share.
Wow. So you almost have to synthetically build this thread that connects your organizations, because you're not basing your productivity or your everyday on things happening naturally occurring in the office anymore.
Yeah, look, people like to think that, if you design the structure of organization, who reports to who, what they you've done the work. But actually that's only the one part, right? A real organization is about the processes, who's responsible, who they, where accountability lies, how we share information, how we measure and monitor, how we give feedback. All of these things have to be designed, and the less kind of easy solution of all being co-located we have, the more we have to give thought into how we design that, and the more we have to give thought into how we communicate what we want to happen and how we want it to work.
Communications. That's,
If people don't communicate, nothing works out the way we want.
Wow. So, David, we talked about so many things. It was extremely interesting. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask you to sum up for our listeners the gist, one of the main things we spoke about earlier, and those are the guidelines for what we said, what being a good manager is all about. You had 6, I think.
Yeah. So I talk about the 6 kind of hallmarks of an excellent CEO from our research. The first is the ability to set the direction. Where are we going?
Direction.
Second, design and align the organization. Who does what in what constellations of people, getting the people designed and set up and populated with the right people. The third is mobilizing through leaders. This is getting people to work together well, measuring, monitoring, and ensuring accountability. The fourth is managing yourself, being effective as a leader, choosing what you spend your time on and maintaining your energy. The fifth is connecting with your stakeholders, your peers, your customers, your competitors, your regulators, the media, and so on. And the final one is managing upwards, if you're a CEO, engaging with your board, if you're a manager, dealing with the constellation, typically your boss and the constellation of your boss's peers in the organization, so that you can make sure that what you do is appreciated and you get the resources to do a great job.
Wow. I think you missed the seventh one, which is listening on a regular basis to this podcast. David Chinn, this was extremely interesting, very intriguing. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to What's Working, Monday.com's podcast about what being a manager is all about. I'm your host, Yadin Katz, and I want to remind you to subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms and tune in to our next episodes coming up soon.